Strange Shadows, a Clark Ashton Smith podcast.
Gilles Grenier the sorcerer and his wife Sabine, coming into Lower Averoigne from parts unknown, or at least unverified, had selected the location of their hut with a careful forethought. The hut was close to those marshes through which the slackening waters of the River Issoire, after leaving the Great Forest, had overflowed in sluggish, reed-clogged channels and sedge-hidden pools, mantled with scum like witches' oils. It stood among osiers and alders on a low, mound-shaped elevation, and in front, towards the marshes, there was a loamy meadow bottom where the short, fat stems and tufted leaves of the mandrake grew in lush abundance, being more plentiful and of greater size than elsewhere through all that sorcery-ridden province. The fleshy, bifurcated roots of this plant, held by many to resemble the human body, were used by Gilles and Sabine in the brewing of love philters. Their potions, being compounded with much care and cunning, soon acquired a marvellous renown amongst the peasants and villagers, and were even in request among people of a loftier station who came privily to the wizard's hut. They would rouse, people said, a kindly warmth in the coldest and most prudent bosom, would melt the armour of the most obdurate virtue. As a result, the demand for these sovereign magistrals became enormous.
Greetings, folks, and welcome to Season 4, Episode 1 of Strange Shadows, the Clark Ashton Smith podcast. Yes, we are back after our very, very brief break. The voice you heard reading the opening paragraph of today's story, The Mandrakes, was Ali Wilkes. I'm one of your hosts, Tim Mendes.
And I'm the other one, Rob Hoyton. And Ali was good enough to visit Innsmouth just a couple of weeks back, which you can hear, of course, on the Innsmouth Book Club podcast. We had a great chat, didn't we? She's an excellent writer.
Yes.
And we're also pleased to report that she's going to be a guest at the Innsmouth Literary Festival 2025. She'll be on at least one of the panels, also signing copies of her books. And a little birdie tells me that she's also posting up on Instagram some Cthulhu cross-stitch bookmarkers that she's making and to be bringing along as well.
Oh, nice.
We're looking forward to that.
Yes, well, she pegged me instantly as a target audience. So I'll probably be buying at least one of those. So there we go.
So, yes, we've had a bit of a short break over the summer. Have you been up to anything interesting, sir?
Mostly rehearsals, and I've got a scary amount of writing work on at the minute. I've been asked to do two things at the same time with the same deadline. So it's getting a bit confused in my head, but it's all going well. But yeah, most of it I've been like rehearsing because by the time this goes out, I will have just done my first gig with Groovy and Green up in Leicester.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I hear you're going to be headlining up at Whitby as well later in the year?
Indeed, yeah. We've been booked to headline Goth at the Brewery, which is one of the fringe events on the Saturday. So that'll be good fun. Whitby Goth Weekend, yes, there's a Goth. It's always on the radar, isn't it?
Well, I've also been busy on the writing front. I've got the final draft out of my Queen of the Fens novel, the sequel to Worms of the Earth. So we're just working through that at the moment. Hopefully that'll be going to print within the next sort of 3 or 4 weeks. And also my fantasy skirmish game, we've got pretty much the first proof or layout proof of that ready as well. And I have to say it's looking really good. My wife has been doing a lot of the artwork and design, and it is looking excellent. So I'm going to be putting something up on my Dragon's Teeth YouTube channel about that in the next week or so. Oh, by the way, for any budding authors out there, I've also just started a series on there on self-publishing, how to come up with ideas, how you actually go about. Basically, I'm trying to cover as much of the whole process as I can. So, yeah, keep an eye out for that as well.
Yeah, I'll have to watch some of them because they're nuts. Because obviously I've never self-published. I've always gone through indie press. But the whole nuts and bolts of it is something that I'm intrigued by, but also quite perturbed. So if you can explain it to me in a way that a numpty like me can understand, that'll be brilliant.
Well, if I can get through it and do it, and I'm notoriously lax in, oh shit, I've forgot to put that bit in, Yeah, it's one of those things. It's procedural, Once you know all the steps, then it's kind of okay. It's always something when I'm doing the final upload, you have to set a whole day aside for. It's one of those things. Yeah, a bit like doing your tax return.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, so speaking of tax returns, yeah, it's been a bit of a strange financial time. Pecuniary depletion is being bandied about a lot. We just had one of those months where my new car had to go in twice to the garage, the boiler packed up, and a drain got blocked as well. The drain alone cost us 300 quid to call a plumber out. He was here for about 45 minutes,
Oh, the hell. Did he stroke his chin and go, it'll cost you?
Pretty much. Yeah. We had to pay extra for him to use his equipment.
Oh, for God's sake.
It's a novel concept, that, isn't it? Can you imagine turning up as a musician, say, I want me 150 quid, but if you want me to actually get my guitar out, you've got to pay extra.
Right, yeah.
Oh dear. Anyway, let us escape from the trials and tribulations of the real world. Let's go back. Let's go back, dear listener, to Averoigne. So, yes, I can't believe we're on season 4 already, which means we now start volume 4 of the collected fantasies of Clark Ashton Smith by Nightshade Press, edited, of course, by Scott Connors and Ron Hilger, the late Scott Connors, we should say. Ron Hilger, by the way, just a quick shout out to Niels, our Auburn correspondent. I believe he has either just done or is about to conduct an interview with Ron Hilger. So obviously, once we get any details of that, we'll be sharing those. And each of these volumes has an introduction. In this case, the introduction is by Gahan Wilson, who is someone very well known in the Lovecraft community, but I don't think we've ever really spoken about him much before, have we?
I think he's come up once or twice, but not in any great detail. Yeah.
Yeah, he was mostly a cartoonist, also an author. He was born in Illinois. He did a lot of work for National Lampoon's Playboy, The New Yorker. He also worked with Harlan Ellison a fair amount as well, from what I gather. And Harlan Ellison was on the Emperor of Dreams documentary, right?
Indeed.
I think he was reasonably close to Smith.
Yeah, I know we've definitely briefly talked about Gahan Wilson because I remember talking about Playboy. And
Steady.
as you would imagine, I do,
And you'll recognise his style. I mean, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have seen his Lovecraftian cartoons. Very distinctive style. And he's quite influential, apparently, as a cartoonist, particularly on people like Gary Larson of The Far Side, who was he was really big in the sort of 80s and 90s, wasn't he? He was putting loads of stuff out.
Very much, yeah.
Gahan Wilson was also involved, I don't know if you know this, sir, in developing a computer game called The Ultimate Haunted House.
Oh, I did know this. I've talked about this before. I can't remember where it was off the top of my head, but I definitely know I delved into this for some reason.
It wasn't part of the research for your book, was it?
It could have been.
The Lovecraftian
Could
game.
have been, yeah.
There's also been a documentary film made about him. If I can find a link to that, I'll put that up in the show notes below. Because again, outside of what we've got here, I don't really know anything much about him at all. So that would be interesting to watch. And I just wanted to read a little bit out of the introduction that he makes for this collection, because I think there's some really great points in here. Clark Ashton Smith's works have always stirred me to the bones. His writings are both meticulously rendered and totally unabashed. His writings can be outrageously grotesque or exquisitely delicate, or both simultaneously and without any clashing whatsoever. They are really and truly wonderful. I was frankly an odd little kid who was always lured by the fantastic and the bizarre. I started my search for this kind of strangeness in art with the Sunday strips, mostly Dick Tracy with his ugly villains, but soon expanded the hunt by quietly plucking DC Comics from the magazine racks of the Evanshire drugstore in Evanston, Illinois, and reading them for free with my small bare elbows resting on the cool marble counter of the soda fountain. So that was quite evocative to me, because that brought back some of my own memories of when newsagents had magazine racks. And those interesting American comics like your Savage Swords of Conan and your Dracula or whatever were on the magazine racks.
Oh, yeah.
With the nudie ones a little bit higher up.
Indeed. Yes. Yes. Of course, my hands were always going towards those.
I mean, pure cold print territory. I know we've spoken about this every available opportunity. How the bookshops and newsagents seem to put the porn and the sci-fi and weird in the same category.
Oh yeah, every time.
And he concludes his introduction with this lovely story about Smith. And this is where a group of Smith's fans had written to Smith to ask if he would be kind enough to let them visit while travelling in the West. So Smith replied with a note saying he'd be delighted to see them, and he included in that a map that showed them how to get to his secluded cabin. Obviously, he's living out of town and all the rest of it. So these people have got this little map and they're driving in their car out in California, and they come to a fork in a narrow road, which wasn't on the map.
Wow.
So they've stopped there and they're sort of thinking, do we go this way? Do we go that way? Well, one of them pointed out the window at the figure of a man climbing down the mountain slope to their left. They peered at him and saw that he was carrying a sign set on a small post. The sign was shaped like an arrow and it had Clark Ashton Smith written on it in big bold letters. So he was on the way to that fork to stick the sign in the ground. That's lovely.
Yes.
And in an odd way, that kind of reminded me of Dracula and Harker and the coach. Is that Dracula driving the coach? So yeah, very nice story there.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, we'll have to get onto Nils and see if he can pinpoint that fork in the road.
Oh, we'll send him on a quest. If you're listening, Nils, that's it. That's your job for the next before we see you next time.
Okay, so shall we do the publication history first of all, and then we can get into our favourite words?
Indeed, yes. Well, Smith completed The Mandrakes on May the 15th, 1932. He described it in letters to August Derleth as a filler story and something that wasn't a very important item. Now, I kind of disagree with this because I actually really enjoyed this. I think this is a great little story.
Oh, yeah.
Now, he's subbed it on completion to Weird Tales.
Let me guess. Drum roll, drum roll.
Yeah, it was accepted.
Oh, my word.
Yeah, first time.
Shock news.
It was accepted around June the 7th, 1932. So it was literally just snapped up as soon as he sent it off. Now, it was published 7 months later in February 1933, that issue of Weird Tales. So while the publication history is quite straightforward, the payment history is something a little more curious. Now, Weird Tales paid Smith $25 when it was published, but unfortunately the check bounced. It bounced because the Fletcher American Bank, where the bulk of the funds of Weird Tales' parent popular fiction publishing company were deposited, has its assets frozen.
Bloody hell.
Smith didn't receive any money for the tale until August, but Weird Tales only paid half of what he was owed.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. So this was the start of a problem with Weird Tales because apparently up until this point they paid reasonably promptly on publication, but from this point on it would take longer and longer to get paid for stories, which is something that he and Derleth bitch about quite a lot, quite rightfully so. But that's you find that a lot in their letters because whereas Smith and Lovecraft talk a lot about random bits and bobs. Smith and Derleth, it's mostly business that they talk about. So, yeah, quite rightly so. They're both a bit cheesed off by this fact, Now, there was an article by Scott Connors called Weird Tales and the Great Depression in the Robert E. Howard Reader, which was edited by Darrell Schweitzer. So that might be interesting to get more information about that. But there you go. That might be something to look at in the future.
Yeah, yeah. And as I say, that is this double weight or triple weight, isn't it? Because sometimes the decision to print or not could take weeks or months. Then you've got to wait for it to be printed. Then you've got to wait potentially, it could be a best part of a year before you get your money. and then it comes back and it's half of what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's exactly what happened here because he completed the story in May 32. It was accepted in June. It was published then in February, which 7 months later, and then he didn't get paid till August. So it was over a year.
Yeah, so unless you're on a sort of roll, yeah. I mean, in some ways, it's the same now. Just going back to that self-publishing briefly, I get paid a quarter later.
Yeah.
So 3 months from the sale of books. So, there is that wait. And then you get into those occasional cash flow issues. And
it's the same with indie press. You tend to, you'll take, sometimes it's quarterly, I mean, very rarely monthly, but it's usually quarterly.
Oh, so that's the price we pay for our art, sir. That's what it is.
Indeed, darling.
So we are back in Averoigne. Let's have a look at our favourite words. Actually, I thought for an Averoigne tale, this was reasonably restrained.
Yes.
But nevertheless, there were a few words. I'm not sure that there was anything new.
Yeah.
I didn't have to look anything up this time, but there were still some gems in there.
Indeed. Well, I'm going to start off. I've got a 2 for 1 here because it's a phrase, but both words in the phrase are tremendous. Connubial infelicities.
Oh, yes. I spotted that one. Yeah, that's great.
Connubial infelicities. Yeah. Connubial is relating to marriage or the relationship between a married couple, sort of like their connubial bed. And infelicities is both a thing that is inappropriate, but the archaic, which I assume is what Smith has been using because it's Smith, means unhappiness or misfortune. So essentially, it's an incredibly baroque way of saying an unhappy marriage.
Yes.
I love it. I'm going to use that in future. When you see a couple having an argument outside a pub. Oh, connubial infelicities.
I'm sure they'll get what you mean. Well, I'm going to double down on that with an alliteration. Again, a nice little phrase here. Quotidian quarrels.
Oh.
Which quotidian just meaning daily. So, yeah. The problems in this marriage are manifest through daily quarrels. Having a bit of a Barney.
Yeah, I looked up that as well because quotidian can also mean mundane, which also works.
Yeah.
They're arguing about curtains again.
Even wizards and witches have their domestic problems.
Right, my next one, you've probably guessed that I would have picked this one out. Is amatory, which is relating to or induced by sexual love or desire.
My word. Well, I'm going for, I suppose in a way it does relate to that, the word privily, which it obviously just means secretly or in private, but it's just a nice form of, we hear privy and privy.
I was going to say privy.
Well, there is, because there's the Privy Council, but then you also go to the privy, right?
Go to the privy, yeah.
So, a nice, almost sort of Shakespearean term there, I thought.
Yeah, right. My final one that I picked up on was recreant, which is cowardly or unfaithful to a belief.
Nice. I'm sticking with my Shakespeare here because I'm going to end with termagant, which I'm pretty sure we've had before, which in this context means a bad-tempered woman. However, up until around the 17th century, this was mostly applied to men, and the equivalent female term was harridan, which you don't hear much these days.
Well, you do if you're around me. Oh. It's one of my favourites. I don't know whether it's a Macclesfield thing or something, but yeah.
Be gone, Harridan.
Yeah. Look at her, she's a right Harridan.
Yeah, but we got Shakespeare to thank for this, apparently, because it's used quite a lot in Shakespeare. And there is speculation that it was because of this thing where female roles were played by male actors, it somehow got transmuted to just referring to bad-tempered women.
Gotcha.
There is another meaning as well, which relates to the name of a god that in medieval times it was believed the Saracens worshipped called Tarmavan or Tarmagant, or there are a few different spellings of it, but that's not the context that Smith is using it in here.
Yeah, I think we have had that one before. I can't remember what the name of the story was, but it was about the guy, the funeral director. Second interment?
Oh, yes, second interment. Yes, yeah. I was pretty sure I'd seen it before. Yeah, perhaps one day we'll produce a Smithian glossary.
Oh,
There's the thoughts for self-publishing.
Yeah. A Smithian phrase for every day.
The little calendars, like
little calendars. Yeah.
Today's word is phlegathon. Get that into conversation.
Oh, mate, I think we should do that.
Yeah, the wheels are turning.
Yeah.
So, the Mandrakes. Yes, we're back in Averoigne. We're in 15th century Averoigne, I believe. I thought it was nice just to look at where this fits within the Averoigne timeline. The gargoyle stories, the maker of gargoyles, and Andeserac.
Azaderac.
And Azaderac. 12th century.
Yep.
13th century, Colossus of Elorn. We're into the Mandrakes now, and also the next story is set around the same time. And then the Disinterment of Venus later on, that's set in 16th century. So we're spanning like 3 or 4 centuries with these stories. The setting doesn't really change, but I suppose it wouldn't over that time period, would it really?
Not sort of, beast haunted woodland Averoigne. It's going to be one of those places that's the same immemorial, right? It's the whole point of these kind of places,
Yeah, quite. Even today, imagine there might be a highway going through the middle of the forest or something, but, beware if you break down.
So there's a story in that. Present day Averoigne. There we go.
Yes, indeed. So we have this couple. We're introduced to this married couple, Gilles Granier, the sorcerer, and his wife, Sabine, coming into Lower Averoigne from parts unknown, or at least unverified. And they're quite specific, it seems, about where they live. This place is chosen for particular reasons. And as I like to do, I always look up the names as well, because I always think Smith knows what he's doing when he names people. Grenier or Grenier, French name, obviously, that means granary or attic. So I can't think of anything that specifically relates to the story in that.
Maybe just like the sound of it.
Yeah, again, alliteration kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sabine is also a French name, but of course this is from the Italian. There were a group of people called the Sabines in central Italy, just around the founding of Rome. And I like when I looked this up, they were described as italic people. I wonder if they'll lean to the right.
Nice.
And I'm sure a lot of listeners will be familiar with the legend of the Sabine women who were abducted by Romans, which of course has been depicted in a lot of famous artwork.
Yeah.
And they later stopped the war by placing themselves and their children between the two armies. So the only connection I can think with the name here is when you look up some of the meanings of the name, obviously it refers back to these people, but also it denotes a fierceness, particularly fierce women, which fits in with the character.
Yes. Yeah.
Although it could be a man's name as well. You're probably familiar with the Victorian novelist Sabine Baring Gould, for example. So a male and female name. I'm not sure when this name became associated with witches, which it seemed to.
Yes.
Obviously, you get into Sabrina, the teenage witch, but I think there's some other modern characters in the Vampire Diaries and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Sabine, it does seem to be quite a common name for witches. I think maybe because it's sort of close to Sabrina, maybe, but you do find it cropping up more and more. In fact, you find a lot of goth women calling themselves Sabine,
right? Because
you have your Ravens and you have your stage names and stuff, but you're seeing a lot of Sabines as well, right?
Yeah, it's just that come to have that association, I guess.
Yeah.
So yes, they've chosen this location for a very particular reason, and that reason seems to be that it's a very good place to grow the mandrake. Now, I think we've got some things to say about mandrakes.
Well, there's a lot.
The Mandragora.
Indeed. I mean, we could do an entire episode on mandrakes, pretty much. I mean, there's so much lore. It's mental, isn't it?
Yeah, in lots of different countries as well.
Yeah, because in the French, it was known as the Hand of Glory, wasn't it?
Was that the fortune telling one as well? That you take the dead criminal's hand and put candles on the fingers?
Mm,
That was the Hand of Glory as well. Yeah. But this is the weird thing with the name, because Mandrake in English you kind of think man and drake or dragon.
indeed.
But then, as you say in French, main de gloire, hand of glory. So a totally different meaning, really.
Yeah.
I suppose in both you can see that it's like a human figure, or maybe you could say it's like the shape of the hand, perhaps.
Yeah, it's very strange, isn't it? Because I mean, they have Mandrake dolls, don't they, in Germany?
Yes, the German name as well gives a slightly different feeling, and the Mandrake dolls, yeah, like the mannequins, right?
Yes. Yeah, Germany, it's also known as Galgen Manolin. Apologies for the pronunciation, which means little gallows man,
Oh,
which stems from the belief that they grow near gallows. So, yeah.
well, this ties in with the Dutch law, and the Dutch have the best name ever.
Oh, don't they just?
And God knows how I'm going to pronounce this, but I'm just going, I'll do the best I can. Pistiefer, which means little urine thief.
Yes. Or urine devil.
Urine devil. Yeah. Talk about taking the piss.
No.
And the law there is that the plant grew from the brains of dead thieves or the droppings of those hung on the gallows. So there's that gallows connection again.
There's so much really strange lore around them. It even goes back to like the harvesting of them in ancient Greco-Roman times, right? 287 BC, it was written that the Mandragora needed to be harvested by following a prescribed ritual, namely draw 3 circles around the root with a sword and cut it facing west. Then, in order to obtain a second piece, the harvester must dance around it while speaking as much lewd talk about sex as he possibly can.
No problem for us then.
Exactly. I mean, that's just brilliant, isn't it?
Well, wasn't there this belief in English folklore that it screamed when you dug it up?
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah,
I think you had to get a dog to pull it out, because if a person dug it up, they'd die. So somehow they'd get, I'm not quite sure how they get the dog to pull it out, but
yeah, it's very strange, isn't it?
Well, references go as far back as the Bible. There's 2 references in the Bible of it as love plants, as either an aphrodisiac or a treatment for infertility. Very specific references.
Yeah, I mean, just delving into it, there's so many really weird and wonderful customs to it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of that is down to the shape of it, the peculiarly human shape.
Yeah.
But then I also suspect the fact that it contains deliriant alkaloids.
Yes, indeed.
Has something to do with it. And I just thought I found my next new band name, the Deliriants.
Well, that's a great one.
I'm so using that.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, I guess that's what led to it being used so much in magic or religious rituals and up to the present day. Wasn't this what they thought that witches made their flying ointment out of and that kind of thing?
Yes, along with belladonna and aconite. Yes, which was rubbed on broomsticks apparently, and then ridden, if you know what I mean. Yes, indeed. That's where the myth of flying on broomsticks comes from,
yeah.
Allegedly.
So there's a huge amount of lore and background. I can see why Smith chose the mandrake. It's a totally Smithian plant, isn't it, in all aspects?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you just look at the amount of times it's appeared in film, books, even songs. I mean, Incubus Succubus have talked about, have sang about mandrake roots several times, to my knowledge.
There was a Deep Purple track as well, Mandrake Root, on their 2nd or 3rd album, I think.
Yeah. There's even an Iron Maiden song, which name escapes me, which one of the lines in it is "Hear the Mandrake Scream."
Nice.
Yeah. Somebody who could remind me what it's called. Probably Tobias. Tobias would probably know.
Yes, I'm sure he will. I'm sure he will. Oh, yeah. So that's what they're dealing with. They've got this nice crop of mandrakes, if we can call it that. The couple dealt also in other drugs and simples, in charms and divination, and Gilles, according to common belief, could read infallibly the dictates of the stars. Oddly enough, considering the temper of the 15th century, when magic and witchcraft were still so widely reprobated, he and his wife enjoyed a repute by no means ill or unsavoury. The speculation is that this is because they're helping so many people with various personal problems, but also in some ways, they're creating marriages, but in other aspects, obviously, there's indiscretions going on as well.
Indeed. Yeah. The local clergy were content to disregard the many illicit amours that had come to a successful issue through the same agency. Now, as soon as I read that, I couldn't help but thinking of Carry On Abroad. Because basically they're drugging people and they're getting the rumpy on, right? That's what's happening here. And if anybody's seen that, you'll know the plot. For those who haven't, basically it's a package coach trip. They go to a really crap hotel in Els Bells out in Spain.
Els Bells.
And it's a terrible holiday by all accounts. And in the third reel, to spice things up, they go to a local market where Sid James buys a load of Spanish fly and then spikes the punch on the last day. So the final scene is this basically long, prolonged thing of the hotel falling down while they're all having rumpy, basically. And I couldn't help but going into it, because obviously Spanish fly is another well-known aphrodisiac, which is derived from blister beetles. It's secreted by them, and it's mainly used for treating contagiosum and warts topically, and it's also a burn agent.
Burn agent?
It's poison. Yeah, it's poisonous in large doses, but can also be used as an aphrodisiac. So if you're going to delve into the Spanish fly, be careful. My advice is just get down Boots and buy some Dickroids.
The interesting thing with adultery, by the way, in medieval times, at least in Britain, was apparently it was so prevalent that the church sort of said, yeah, well, okay, whatever. It was largely overlooked. Interesting that at the same time, if someone looked a bit different, they could be accused of being a witch or a warlock or something. Strange how these things work, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you kind of get the impression these two, well, I was going to say they know where the bodies are buried, which proves quite literal later on. But this is like, the bishop comes to him and says, look, I'm having a bit of trouble with the old what's it? Can you. So they help him out. And in turn, of course, is when the Inquisition comes around, no, there's nothing to see here. That's how that works, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because he says in the next paragraph that it's true there were those who looked askance at Gilles in the beginning and who whispered fearfully that he had been driven out of Blois, where all persons bearing the name Grenier were popularly believed to be werewolves. So there's a little bit of foreshadowing for the next story.
It is. Yes. Averoigne and werewolves. We like a bit of that, don't we? Yeah. A hairy man, hairy palms. His hands were black with bristles, and his beard grew almost to his eyes. It's a hairy chap, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there we go. That's one of those. You've got that belief then as well. If a guy's hairy, he must be a werewolf.
Obviously, never been to a Black Sabbath concert. Yeah.
Sabine, a comely woman with blue-grey eyes and wheat-coloured hair, was obviously much younger than Gilles, whose sable mane and beard were already touched with the white warp of time. It was rumoured by visitors that she had oftentimes been overheard in sharp dispute with her husband, and people soon made a jest of this, remarking that the philters might well be put to domestic use by those who pervade them. But aside from such rumours and ribaldries, little was thought of the matter. The connubial infelicities of Gilles and his wife, whether grave or trivial, in no wise impaired the renown of their love potions. So I did wonder, having read the whole story again, if there was an implication here that although she seems younger than him, I wonder if she's actually older.
Yeah.
I don't know, I was getting a little vibe of she's been around for quite a while, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, that does seem to be the implication, because you have that sort of well-worn trope of witches not aging.
Mm.
You know.
And perhaps she captured him through a filter or potion when he was a young man.
Oh,
And now,
oh,
as he's grown older, she stays the same. It's a possibility.
yeah.
But no one really cares as long as they're producing the goods, right? A blind eye is
The rumpy remedy. Yeah.
People would be sneaking there at dusk, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Probably got like a back door, just come in through the back door, knock 3 times.
like you see like a guy who looks like a stockbroker looking left and right before ducking into a doorway to buy a bottle of amatory,
Well, we're back to our cold print and all that stuff again, aren't we?
Indeed. Soho, right?
Yeah, plain brown bag and all the rest.
Yeah.
So this is all going on and everything's fine until Sabine disappears. But even then, no one really thinks much of it. The sorcerer merely said that his spouse had departed on a long journey to visit relatives in a remote province. Reasonable enough back in those days. If you wanted to travel anywhere, you're going to be gone for weeks at a time, right? Even though this is fairly light on the Baroque language, we still get some lovely description. And again, with Smith, it relates to the local scenery. So winter came early, then we get spring, and this is the description. When the tardy spring had broken the silver buds of the willows and had covered the alders with the foliage of chrysolite, few thought to ask of Gilles regarding Sabine's return. And later, when the purple bells of the mandrake were succeeded by small orange-coloured apples, a prolonged absence was taken for granted. So he could just say again, it was months later, but just this nice description of the changing scenery and the arrival of spring.
Yeah, he's showing his poetic chops again, isn't he, with the descriptions of the local flora, which, so it's something he's done right from the start. But it's always different. It's always slightly different, which is quite impressive when you think we're 4 books in and he's still impressing with descriptions of plants.
Yes.
Because we get even more so in a bit, don't we, with about the leaves, and just quite subtly.
Yeah, and again, it's done with, it's not overblown, it's quite sparse in a way, but just that precision in the words and the language.
But in this next paragraph, we find out what really happened, don't we? Gilles, living tranquilly with his books and cauldrons and gathering the roots and herbs for his magical medicaments, was well enough pleased to have taken it for granted. He did not believe that Sabine would ever return, and his unbelief, it was seen, was far from irrational. He had killed her one eve in autumn, during a dispute of unbearable acrimony, slitting her soft, pale throat in self-defence with a knife, which he had wrestled from her fingers when she lifted it against him. Afterward, he had buried her by the late rays of a gibbous moon beneath the mandrakes in the meadow bottom, replacing the leafy sods with much care, so that there was no evidence of their having been disturbed other than by the digging of a few roots in the way of daily business.
Yes, he's buried her with the mandrakes. You can't help feeling that's a bit of a mistake.
Indeed.
Given all the places he could have chosen in the whole forest of Averoigne, not to mention all the swampy marshland around, he's put her in with the mandrakes. He should know better than that, shouldn't he? And he does notice as the season draws on that there was a place where the mandrakes grew with even more than their wonted exuberance. And this place, he believed, was the very site of her grave, because he buried her so well that he can't quite remember where it was exactly.
Yeah.
There's no real sign. It's not one of those, the little mound, or the Billy Connolly joke with the bum sticking up out the
I needed somewhere to park my bike.
Anyone who doesn't know that reference can look up Billy Connolly on Parkinson.
Absolute classic of British TV. Yeah.
But old Gilles has got no regrets about this, right? He was not sorry that he had killed Sabine. They had been ill-mated from the beginning, and the woman had shown toward him in their quotidian quarrels the venomous spitefulness of the very hellcat. He had not loved the vixen, and it was far pleasanter to be alone, with his somewhat sombre temper unruffled by her acrid speeches, and his sallow face and grizzling beard untorn by her sharp fingernails. So this really wasn't a happy relationship.
No. I think in modern parlance, you'd call it toxic.
Yes.
Just a little.
Yes. And we can only speculate as to the reasons.
Yeah, but if, like you say, he was kind of bewitched, maybe it wore off over time, or, well, a lot of things lose their luster, don't they? But it seems that they're both quite hot-tempered and quite nefarious as well, which is never a good combination.
Anyway, life goes on as normal, and there's the usual steady stream of customers, especially with the renewal of spring, the sweet spring. There was much demand for his love philtres among the smitten swains and lassies of the neighbourhood. There came to him also the gallants who sought to overcome a stubborn chastity, and the wives who wished to recall a wandering fancy or allure the forbidden desires of young men. Anon it became necessary for Gilles to replenish his stock of mandrake potions, and with this purpose in mind, he went forth at midnight beneath the full May moon to dig the newly grown roots from which he would brew his amatory enchantments. So again, there's this idea of there's a particular way. You don't just go out and dig these plants up. There's some sort of ritual involved.
Yeah, by the moon and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I like the fact that he digs them out with a curious trowel that is made from a femur. That's a nice little touch, isn't it?
Yes.
And is obviously very used to seeing and handling mandrake roots. But the ones that he digs up are surprisingly even more like a body. To be specific, inordinately large, unnaturally white, he saw that it bore the exact likeness of a woman's body and lower limbs, being cloven to the middle and clearly formed even to the 10 toes. There were no arms, however. And he gets a sensation that when he takes it out of the ground, it writhes, it moves in his hand. So he drops it. This was quite creepy. He dropped it hastily, and the minikin limbs lay quivering on the grass.
Well, because he's a guy of a sort of particular bent, he took this prodigy as a possible mark of satanic favor and continued his digging. To his amazement, the next root was formed in much the same manner as the first. A half dozen more, which he proceeded to dig, were shaped in miniature mockery of a woman from breasts to heels, and amid the superstitious awe and wonder with which he regarded them, he became aware of their singularly intimate resemblance to Sabine.
Yeah. Now, this is there's no yokel knowledge in this, right, as such.
No.
But this is where, again, this guy is ignoring every clue or warning or strange thing, and he's just shrugging it off as, actually, this is a good thing. It's quite remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah. I like that mention of satanic favor, which harks back to what you were saying earlier, because there is reference to mandrakes in the Bible. So I wonder if that was a conscious thing by Smith.
Oh, yeah, quite possibly that as well. Yeah. And this is where we get the next level of creepiness. His hand trembled as he started to dig up another plant, and working with less than his usual care, he failed to remove the whole of the bifurcated root, cutting into it clumsily with the trowel of sharp bone. He saw that he had severed one of the tiny ankles. At the same instant, a shrill, reproachful cry, like the voice of Sabine herself in mingled pain and anger, seemed to pierce his ears with intolerable acuity, though the volume was strangely lessened, as if the voice had come from a distance. Gilles found himself staring at the trowel, on which there was a dark blood-like stain. Trembling, he pulled out the severed root and saw that it was dripping with a sanguine fluid. I mean, how much more notice does he need? Really?
Yeah, because at first, in his dark fear and half guilty apprehension, he thought of burying the roots which lay palely before him with their eldritch and obscene similitude to the dead sorceress. He would hide them deeply from his own sight and ken of others, lest the murder he had done should somehow be suspected.
Yeah, this is where we get that we so often see in weird stories, that denial.
Mm-hmm.
Now, normally that's someone saying something weird is happening. No, everything's normal, nothing to see here. They kind of repress it. This guy's a sorcerer. He's fully versed in the weird and the satanic, I guess. But he still applies this logic to say, no, it's just a coincidence. No one else will know about this. And if look at the size of these, look how plump and juicy they are. They're going to be really powerful in my filters. So he thinks it's an advantage for him.
Oh yeah, because he thinks he would be able to brew filters of never equaled power. So yeah, he fills a small osier basket with the quivering leaf-headed figurines, then went back to his hut, seeing in the bizarre phenomenon merely the curious advantage to which it might be turned, and wholly oblivious to any darker meaning, such as might have been read by others in his place. So essentially, Gilles he's not the brightest star in the sky, is he?
No, I mean, there's like 3 or 4 absolute warnings there to like, oh, maybe I better just leave these. Perhaps I'll move somewhere else. Maybe, all the things that could potentially come out of this. None of them are going to be good for him, but he just sees an opportunity to make more money, I guess, or increase his reputation.
Yeah.
Even when he puts these in the pot, right, and starts boiling them up, he gets an ungodly, furious hissing, the mad foaming and boiling of the brew like a devil's broth. He ascribed this to the unique potency of the ingredients. He even dared to choose the most shapely and perfect of the woman-like plants and hung it up in his hut amid the other roots and dried herbs, intending to consult it as an oracle in the future, according to the custom of wizards. So it is being remarkably dim here, I think.
Yeah, well, it's that. I mean, because this borders on a Conte cruel, doesn't it? Because it's that sort of avarice leading to somebody's downfall. All he's seeing is whatever currency spinning before his eyes, right? He's blinded to everything else. It's that greed thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That greed overrides all sense. You see it a lot in these kind of cautionary tales.
Yeah, and the other aspect is that monomania. Again, we're seeing weird fiction, right? We're going to get to the mountains of madness regardless. I don't care if there's a strange 6-armed thing that's just torn the party apart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
we're carrying on, by God.
Yeah. So almost Jamesian, isn't it? It's a warning to the curious.
Yeah,
that will always go unheeded.
Yeah. Put it back. Well, that's what you want to say in this one, right? No digging here.
Yeah, no digging here. Put it back. Yeah.
So he brews up his latest batch of potions and he gives them out. He sells them all and he sits back and you can imagine rubbing his hands and counting his coins, his gold and silver coins. But this is where it all starts really going wrong. As it happened, however, these latter potions were never dispensed, and only a few of the first were sold, owing to the frightful and calamitous consequences that followed their use. For those to whom the potions had been administered privily, whether men or women, were not moved by the genial fury of desire, as was the wanted result, but were driven by a darker rage, by a woeful and satanic madness, irresistibly impelling them to harm or even slay the persons who had sought to attract their love. So we go from a love potion to a hate potion.
Husbands were turned against wives, lasses against their lovers, with speeches of bitter hate and scatheful deeds. A certain young gallant, who had gone to the promised rendezvous, was met by a vengeful madwoman, who tore his face into bleeding shreds with her nails. So there's a nice callback there, isn't there? Tearing his face into bleeding shreds with her nails.
Yes.
Because that's Sabine did to him.
Yeah, exactly that, isn't it?
So this is her rage manifest.
Yeah, I'm getting real sort of Hammer vibes for this one. I could really see this as a Hammer film.
I could, or one of those anthology series, a Boris Karloff's Thriller, or Night Gallery, anything to do with Rod Serling.
So initially, it's kind of thought, is this people being possessed by demonic forces? But everyone kind of knows about these potions. It's not really a secret. It's such. It's just something not openly spoken about, I guess. So 2 and 2 equals 4. Obviously, these people are taking potions. Who makes the potions? Oh, it's Gilles Grenier. The constables want to have a word. Yeah, want a word with you.
Yeah, he's now gets charged with sorcery. It's quite swift, isn't it? Like you're saying, they obviously know about this. He's on the radar. It's like you see that in the classic local policing, that you had your beat Bobby on the estate, right? So something got piked, the usual suspects and all get rounded up and taken down the nick.
That's it. That's it. We know who it is. We've
Yeah,
just
yeah,
not
yeah.
got anything on
Yeah.
them at the moment. But
Drag them all in
yeah,
until
yeah.
one of them cracks, basically. You know?
They go and arrest him, and he's kind of nonplussed. You know, he doesn't put up any resistance or anything else. In fact, he's already brewing up another batch here. Right? He's got another cauldron that's foaming and hissing and boiling away, as if it had been filled with the spate of Phlegethon, the fiery river in Hades. Another nice little satanic reference there, perhaps, or the underworld.
Yeah.
As they were about to leave with their prisoner, the officers heard a shrill, tiny, shrewish voice that cried from the shadows of the hut, where bunches of dried simples and other sorcerous ingredients were hanging. It appeared to issue from a strange, half-withered root, cloven in the very likeness of a woman's body and legs. One of the constables thought he recognized the voice as being that of Sabine, the sorcerer's wife. All swore that they heard the voice clearly and were able to distinguish these words: "Dig deeply in the meadow where the mandrakes grow the thickliest." I love that word, the thickliest.
Thickliest. Nice.
That's a little bit Telltale Heart as well, isn't it? That
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
So, of course, they go and have a bit of a dig around, and that leads us to the last paragraph. Digging by lantern light in the specified spot, they found many more of the enchanted roots, which seemed to crowd the ground, and beneath they came to the rotting corpse of a woman, which was still recognizable as that of Sabine. As a result of this discovery, Gilles Grenier was arraigned not only for sorcery, but also for the murder of his wife. He was readily convicted of both crimes, though he denied stoutly the imputation of intentional malefice, and claimed to the very last that he had killed Sabine only in defence of his own life against her termagant fury. He was hanged on the gibbet in company with other murderers, and his dead body was then burned at the stake. Justice is swift.
Indeed.
Yes. Now, this bit at the end sparked, well, it sparked one sort of thought or memory in me that then led to another one. So bear with me.
Did you go down the rabbit hole?
I did. In my own little mind. He was hanged on the gibbet, and his dead body was then burned at the stake.
Mm-hmm.
So he's killed and then is burnt at the stake. Seems a little bit odd. But for some reason, this popped into my head. There was a film called Kentucky Fried Movie, probably in the 80s.
Late 70s, I thought. I thought it was like 79. It's sort of on the cusp, isn't it?
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And it was one of those films you see at a certain age. And they had a section in it called A Fistful of Yen, which was a very good spoof on Enter the Dragon. If you've never seen Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, basically he's put in undercover to the island of a super criminal who's holding a martial arts tournament to recruit top-level fighters for his nefarious activities. It's James Bond with Kung Fu.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And Fistful of Yen spoof this beautifully. And I think we could have written some of it. There's such great lines as the British intelligence guy is showing Lou, who plays the character of Lee, photos. This is Mr. Khan, whatever his name was. This is his bodyguard. He is tough and ruthless. This is his driver. He is rough and toothless. You know?
Yeah. Nice.
It's that sort of level. But at one point, the big boss kills an undercover agent. There's another one that they capture on the island, and he executes him and then says, "Now take him away to be tortured." It just struck me how stupid this was, that you kill someone and then you're going to burn them as well. But then I thought of an Innsmouth excursion I did a little while back in London at Red Lion Square, which was supposedly haunted by the ghost of Oliver Cromwell and two of his friends.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
Because when Charles II came to the throne, the Restoration in 1660, I think it was, obviously he wanted revenge on Cromwell and also his two closest compatriots, John Bradshaw and Henry Ireton. All three of them had died, but that didn't stop Charles. He dug them up. Their bodies were dragged off to Tyburn, where they were hanged. They were left hanging there for a day or so, I think. The heads were then removed and the bodies were chucked into a pit. And it is said that pit was at the back of the Red Lion Inn. They had an old pit there they were chucked in, which of course is now where Red Lion Square is, hence, I suppose, the presumed hauntings. So I thought you go from a fantasy story to a comedic film to actual history where a king had 3 people dug up, tried, hung, executed, and then slung in a pit. You know, real life and fiction.
Oh, yeah. If you look through history, I mean, they were doing that more often than you'd think. Indignities to cadavers seemed to be a pastime of kings of a bygone time. For some, it's like that bastard. Dig him up, dig him up and hang him.
Yeah, dig him up and hang it. That's crazy, isn't it? I mean, you can kind of see the heads on spikes as a sort of show, a deterrent, maybe, that sort of thing. It's an indignity, I suppose, isn't it?
Indeed, yeah.
I wonder if it plays into the idea of resurrection as well, because, well, let's just say I was at an event the other week, and part of the reading was when the last trumpet sounds, you shall rise and be clothed again in flesh, and some weird stuff from, I'm not sure what book it's from, what book of the Bible. But so if you've dug this person up and kind of mutilated them, then they won't undergo the resurrection. Perhaps, maybe that's the thing.
Well, it's so similar to the Romanian superstitions of driving stakes into bodies. So come the resurrection, they can't rise because they're pinned to the coffin, kind of thing. Which is where the vampirism thing comes from.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And then we even get into Victorian times, Ratcliffe Highway.
Yes,
right?
Ratcliffe Highway.
Crossroads, buried at the Crossroads.
Indeed, buried at the Crossroads. Old John Williams. Yes.
So there we are, our first story of season 4. Quite a short story, but one packed with goodness. A pretty straightforward plot. But Smith tends to go for pretty straightforward plots, doesn't he? To be fair,
something about that I really thoroughly enjoyed. That it's my kind of sort of macabre. I liked it. Plus, I'm always a sucker for a plant monster kind of story. So anything with evil or weird plants in, I like.
That's hence that Venus flytrap behind you.
Indeed.
Now, we don't have anything in Dawnwood Spire and Lonely Hill for this other than a single mention, but I gather you've got some other correspondence there about this.
I've got one letter which is dated May 15th, 1932 to August Derleth. You can find it in Eccentric Impractical Devils, which I still think is a tremendous name for a book. Now, the mention here of the story is admittedly very brief and wouldn't really be worth mentioning. It's what comes before it that I wanted to delve into, because this is gold. No word from Bates about my various stories. He sent me yesterday, however, a terrific communication from one GP Olsen of Sheldon, Iowa, which had been addressed to me in care of Strange Tales. I've had letters from madmen before, but this one really took the gilt-edged angel cake. 12 single-spaced pages, much of it phrased with the lucidity almost equal to that of a Gertrude Stein or Hegel. Among other things, as well as I could make it out, the fellow seemed to be desirous of correcting certain erroneous ideas about demons and vampires which he had discovered in the Nameless Offspring. Also, he wanted to point out the errors of Abdul al-Hazred. Some of this stuff about vampires was really weird. You never thought of a vampire in your life, but he appeared like an emperor or an archangel. Then he exhorts me to refrain from putting vampires in a bad light, since, by virtue of a little blood-sucking, they really confer immortality on those they have chosen. Later, apropos of God knows what, he told me that you must realize it will never be stood for if you act in any other way than that befitting a Spanish Don. The letter is the damnedest mixture of paranoia, delusions of grandeur, and mystic delirium that ever went through the US mail. The fellow writes of Ammon Ra and Arimain in the language of an illiterate Swede. he he ends with something to the effect that his letter is the most momentous intellectual promulgation of the age. I'm not in the habit of ignoring letters, but there's nothing else to be done in this case. P.S. I've finished one new tale, The Mandrakes. Short, sweet, and medieval. It's about a sorcerer who murdered his wife and buried her in the field where he got the mandrakes for the love philters in which he specialized. Later, something happened to the mandrake crop.
Wow.
Gold, isn't it?
I mean, this is pre-internet stuff, isn't it? In that sense,
mental, isn't it?
A single space, did he say? So that was probably quite squeezed together sort of writing. I can kind of visualize that. I can almost see it in green ink or something, right?
You can.
Yeah.
Yeah, manic scrawl, all in capitals.
Yeah. So vampires are real, and we should revere them because they bestow immortality upon us.
Yeah, and Abdullah Hazred was wrong.
Of course he was.
Now, this has given me, because from time to time, I like when we're taking breaks, I go off on a tangent and do these little mini episodes about some random crap that I've discovered in these kind of things. Now, this GP Olsen of Sheldon, Iowa, had apparently been writing lengthy rants not only to Clark Ashton Smith, but also to August Derleth, Robert E. Howard, Henry S. Whitehead, and H.P. Lovecraft about vampires and various esoteric theories.
Wow.
Now, Bobby Deary has written an essay about it in the Lovecraft Annual number 12, which was published in 2018, called That Fool Olsen. So I'm going to get that, and I'm going to find all the letters. And at some point in the future, dear listener, you are going to get an entire mini episode devoted to That Fool Olsen.
Mr. Olsen. Yeah. Oh, my word.
I just can't not. It's just too good to miss.
He obviously had a lot of time on his hands. It sounds like he had a real bee in his bonnet, this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, this is flat earth and beyond, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah, that's what I'm going to have to get the letters that he wrote to all the other guys and go into them, because there's going to be some Olympic standard lunacy in them, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm particularly interested to know what he thought Al-Hazred got wrong.
Yeah, same.
To be fair, we know what happened to him in the end, right? He's torn apart by an invisible monster. Mm-hmm. So he obviously got something wrong. Did he get a word wrong in his invocation or something? Or was he just revealing too much?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm intrigued. I'm going to have to do it. Like, when we get done today, I'm going to go through this and see if Derleth talks about his correspondence with him.
Yeah, I'll see if he crops up in Dawnwood Spire as well. We'll have a look in there. Call of Cthulhu players, wouldn't this make a great NPC? Imagine your investigators being dogged by this man who says, "You're not doing that right.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be, and leave the vampires alone."
Vampires are people too. Little pin badge.
Oh, yeah, was the head of the Dracula fan club or something.
Yeah. You see Ponson about Whitby in a top hat.
Leave Dracula alone.
Yeah.
Oh, that is extraordinary. I'm looking forward to hearing more about Mr. Olsen. Amazing.
I'm loving it. So I'm going to start the research. I'm going to start the research now because I'm just so intrigued. I just want to know what else he was banging on about.
Now, your mini episode that you referenced there has also thrown up another letter, thankfully by someone rather more sane than Mr. Olsen. Well, we say that, you know.
We're all mad here.
It's our friend Mark Griffin from 30 Plus Minutes with HP Lovecraft podcast. And Mark has sent in an email in which he writes the following. James still is not a poet one would expect to hear mentioned on a podcast about Clark Ashton Smith. So when you were heard uttering his name while reciting a review by August Derleth, comparing favourably both Still and Smith, this listener had to pause and keep asking the screen, "Are you talking about the Appalachian writer?" So when you explained that Still was in fact the Appalachian writer, the author of the amazing River of Earth, this listener's mind was blown. Steele was not a writer of speculative fiction, but a regionalist who documented the people, things, and sayings he came across. Derleth knew a good number of Kentucky writers. He corresponded with Jesse Stewart, another from the Appalachian, who was also not known for speculative fiction, but Derleth managed to find one tale by him to publish in a horror anthology, Over the Edge, New Stories of the Macabre. When Derleth died, Stewart wrote a moving tribute to his friend. When it came to writing, Derleth possessed twin but separate interests. He wrote of the supernatural and of his regional fiction of Wisconsin. The latter drew him to other regional writers in different states. Derleth kept these interests separate. When writing to Stewart, he rarely mentioned the supernatural, and the same could be said about the Lovecraft Circle and regional fiction. So, when James Steele's name was uttered in a previous episode, this listener was surprised, but yet not surprised. This listener is now searching to see if the two writers ever communicated through letters, as if this writer needed another project to do. Thank you for increasing the workload, Mark.
You're most welcome, sir.
Yeah, we aim to please.
Yeah, because I mean, Derleth's probably most successful works was his Sac Prairie saga, wasn't it? Which was his regional writing about Wisconsin. Yeah.
And I think a general consensus is that his non-mythos writing, whether it be that or whether it be the detective novels, that they were sort of a higher standard than his Lovecraftian pastiches, perhaps.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, his horror stories that weren't Lovecraftian, like some of his ghost stories, were really, really good. You know, I think August Derleth is actually criminally underrated as an author, because a lot of people have only read what was, you know, brought out, though, you know, the posthumous collaborations, which a lot of them aren't great by any stretch of the imagination. But some of his other work was really, really good. I guess there's an aspect, like you see with Smith, you know, with his lesser tales and things like that, of paying the bills.
And also, in a way, pushing stuff out in order to promote Lovecraft and the mythos, and by extension, Arkham House, which, you know, it is a perfectly fine and a natural thing to do. You know, you can't keep recycling the same 40 stories over and over again.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, to my mind anyway, because I'm sure you're the same, particularly in doing my stories about the Fens, huge amounts of research into local folklore and just history in general. So I've always seen a crossover between the two strands or genres anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean, I tend to weave a lot of it into my stories. Like, so a lot of my stuff's set in Cornwall, so I use a lot of like traditional Cornish folklore, but then give it a mythosy twist. And I've started doing it with the local area because, I mean, as you know, I mean, one of my big hobbies is me and the other half. We go out walking and finding weird things. Like the other week, we found a tomb high up in the Downs and things like this.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
and all this kind of stuff. So I've started doing stuff about that now as well, just because I've got so much of it in my head. I may as well do something with it, right? And I guess this is kind of a similar thing to what people like Derleth do. Like, even on the way back from some of our like things where we've gone specifically, we'll be going somewhere else and I'll spot something and go, that's a bit weird. And I'll look it up and it'll go like, oh, right, well, that's where somebody was at. That's where people were hung, or yada, yada, yada. It's like, yeah. Or like, yeah, walking back to the station one night, we went through a tiny little village which was having a scarecrow festival, and it was terrifying.
Oh, yes, I've seen, we have those around here, yeah, and it's a bit of a
yeah, I come round the corner, right, because we were headed to a pub, and I was like, I think it's around this corner.
That was actually the inspiration for my story, The Scarecrow in Remnants, where let's just say one follows him home. Let's put it like that.
Ah, nice.
All right, there we go. Thank you, folks, for joining us today for our first episode in season 4. A lot of good stuff to come, and of course we'll be putting out our bonus episodes as well, mostly on Smith's poetry, but I suspect Mr. Olsen is going to be making an appearance as well. And of course, any ideas or questions or suggestions or corrections you have, please do write in and let us know. I believe we're returning to Averoigne next time.
Yes, we are indeed, because next time we are looking at one of Smith's classic tales, The Beast of Averoigne.
Marvellous, marvellous. I hope you can join us for that. Thanks very much for listening today. Just time to welcome a new patron. Thank you for signing up, Copper Fox Wolf. There's an interesting name.
That's a good name, isn't it? Wow.
And if you'd like to join Copper Fox Wolf and our other patrons in supporting the show, do check out our Patreon site. As always, you get access to all our bonus content for this and the Innsmouth Book Club. You get a quarterly copy of Innsmouth News. We're just working on the summer edition now. And as well as that, you get free entry to our events such as the Innsmouth Literary Festival, where, well, as well as Ali Wilkes, you can see a number of other excellent authors and artists, live music, live readings, all sorts of great stuff going on. There might even be some Lovecraftian tarot readings, I hear. So lots to look forward to there. Okay, thanks again, folks. That's it for now. Just a reminder to be careful where you go digging. And it's goodbye from me, Rob Whiten.
And it's goodbye from me, Tim Mendes.